Good morning, Cowboys Nation. This is Bryson with InsideTheStar.com, and we are back with you for another episode of Cowboys Weekly. Joining me, as always, is Inside the Star senior writer Jess Haney. How are you doing today, Jess?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I am doing quite well, actually. It was a nice week this past week in the NFL for the Cowboys fans.
Yes, it was. Nice to get a win. I think if I remember correctly, obviously the Eagles losing was a big one. That's the key thing that we cared about as far as other games from the week. We didn't get a lot of help in any other areas, but Cowboys win, Eagles lose. That's really all we need to hear the rest of the season.
Yeah, that would be that'd be a nice thing the more often we can hear that for sure. But, it's not just going to, come down to that. We need to see this team actually starting to click in ways that they're not necessarily clicking lately. Mm-hmm. There are reasons for it, and I don't know if I want to put this on the coaches completely, but I didn't like the way our running game looked with Ezekiel Elliott on Sunday. I thought it was a very good thing that they, finally came back. It seems like they swing back and forth. They'll go a couple of games and you won't see Tony Pollard at all. And then you'll see him for a game and he has good results and it, mixes things up really well. And then we won't see him again and we end up getting our butts kicked. And then they come back the next week and they're like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's put Tony Pollard in there some more. It seems like an overcommitment to Ezekiel Elliott, to number 21 being the ball carrier, and not so much to just keeping things fresh,
Yeah, and it's a tough one. I wrote about last week, actually, in response to the Vikings game, that I worry maybe there's a little bit of outside influence, not necessarily a person, but just getting outside of just the normal scope of football. When you've got this guy that you just gave the richest running back contract in NFL history to, how obligated do you feel to use him outside of what you would do if money was even across the board? If he was just any other guy, that's the part that is tough to fathom right now, and you don't know what's going on in everyone's head. You would like to think that Kellen Moore isn't calling plays based on how much money Zeke makes, but there's sometimes things that even happen on a subconscious level. And I wouldn't even put that on the money so much, but on the stardom that Ezekiel Elliott has, which the money really quantifies. Right. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And it's also difficult to really figure that one out because we haven't seen Kellen Moore calling the plays yet. So there is such a drastic change in there. You can't tell what's caused by one thing and what's caused by another. But I kind of wonder that too, if there isn't that, kind of like going back to Terrell Owens when, Romo was obviously forcing in the ball too much and sometimes it bit us in the butt. So, I don't want to see that happen again because, we've been there, we've done that. We learned that that's not always the best way to play it.
Right. I think that football sometimes, even though it's not basketball, you can still fall victim to that mentality of it's a clutch situation. I want the ball in LeBron James' hands, Kobe Bryant's hands, Michael Jordan's hands. That's how basketball teams think. And that's logical when you've got 5 guys to pick from. But football is a different kind of game, and you can't really think that way. That's when you're doing stuff like the Seahawks trying to throw it instead of handing it to Marshawn Lynch and losing a Super Bowl. Right. That's the situation you put yourself in.
And I think we've been seeing that off and on throughout the year. And like I said, I was just very pleased with those results against the Lions. It helped, And of course, Ezekiel Elliott, he's not as effective this year, but there are reasons for that. Sometimes, yes, it does look like I don't want to say lost a step. That sounds too final. It's more maybe a distraction kind of thing, or it could be a play calling kind of thing. But there is also the point that Dak Prescott is playing very well. Amari Cooper and Randall Cobb and Michael Gallup and Blake Jarwin, they're all playing very well, and it's given us a hell of a passing game. And, when you do that, there's only so many snaps per game. and you're not going to get them equally spread out. If the passing game is on fire, the running game's going to suffer. If the running game's on fire, the passing game's going to suffer. So there is some of that to go into it as well. But I just like that they aren't leaving tools in the shed to rust. You know what I mean? I like seeing Tony Pollard out there. He has a different kind of burst. He's got some energy to him that I just really like to see. And it's a little different than Ezekiel Elliott. It's that whole change of pace back thing. And I think he can do it better than a lot of teams try to make that happen,
Yeah, and that was exactly, you said change of pace. That was exactly where I was about to go, is to change of pace, you have to have a pace. So you can't, Tony Pollard's not going to be effective without the heavy doses of Zeke in a lot of ways. I mean, they all kind of go together. And another thing to keep in mind, too, from the Lions game is that we did not have a starting offensive lineman out there in Connor Williams. There's, you can debate if you think Xavier Su'a-Filo is a better run blocker at this point. I mean, I don't know. Connor Williams is in his second year. He's the starter for a reason. So that was another factor, perhaps, too, in the run game and effectiveness. I mean, it's hard to evaluate that because it was so bad the week before with Connor Williams playing against Minnesota. So you can't. It's hard to know how much that played a part in the Detroit game. But all in all, I mean, it was another game where Zeke didn't even average 3 yards a carry. We don't like seeing that, obviously, but all in all, I mean, the game went the way we needed it to. The passing game is tremendous right now. It's as good as we've had it in a long time in Dallas. Still issues on defense, still issues on special teams. I'm more worried, honestly, about some of those things than the run game.
Yeah, I'm not so much worried about the run game because, I mean, this is 2 weeks in a row that the running game seemed to just never be able to get going, but the passing game was just lit. I mean, you get that for a reason. It's because people are trying to shut down Zeke, and
at a certain point they're going to have to adjust. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're doing it effectively, but
at what cost?
Kind of. I mean, the passing game's going great, and passing game's having, big plays, and it's exciting. It's scoring points. It's a good thing, but at the same time, you want that balance. No team ever goes to the Super Bowl trying to ride just one facet of their game. They always want balance, and I guess I'm suffering from that same illness. I want balance, even though we are having some success. In absence of that balance, I want that balance because we could be that much better.
Agreed. We need offensive balance, and hopefully after the last few weeks, I mean, or honestly the whole season, you would think that teams would start adjusting more to defend the pass and open up things for Zeke. I think that's part of what has been so perplexing is we would expect those things to be happening during these games. We would expect Detroit and Minnesota to, at halftime, realize, man, these guys are killing us through the air, and they would start to adjust and open up more things in the run game. That hasn't happened. But, I mean, as long as the Cowboys can just keep being this explosive on their passing offense, it might not matter.
And, I wonder how much of that actually has to do with, that pace you were talking about. The passing game gets into a good rhythm, and then the opposing defense is adjusting, but it doesn't matter as much at that point because everything's just, firing on all cylinders and they're rolling.
Very true. And right now, I mean, the Cowboys have one wide receiver who is just about uncoverable in Amari Cooper. I mean, these toe-tapping catches that he's doing on an hour routine basis, and just the way he runs smooth through his routes, and the way now things open up once you start to key on him. Sky's the limit for this passing game right now, and it'll be very interesting to see. Not to get ahead of it this week, but I mean, it will be very interesting what New England does, what their approach is to trying to stop the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting to see what the Vikings and the Lions would try to do to stop it, but it's not helping the other side of the ball, which is still a problem. I mean, this defense is still not clicking. I was reading something earlier yesterday, somebody actually posing a question that really is ridiculous, and I shouldn't even mention him because it's clickbait, but it's also one of those things where it would explain something. So, I mean, at this point, can you really throw out a viable alternative just because it's ridiculous? And that's talking about Chris Richard somehow following in the perception of what people had with Jason Garrett as a coordinator under Phillips, that, there's some element of tanking or not doing so well there to make the superior look worse in anticipation of a promotion coming for themselves. You know what I mean? But I mean, the way the defense is playing, it just seems so far below their talent level. I don't know. You start grasping at straws at some point.
If that is the case, that is a really foolish strategy, because he is not Jason Garrett when it comes to having the support of the owner, the heir apparent status. This is a guy who has already been fired by one team as a defensive coordinator. So do you really want another defense tanking and underachieving on your watch, on your resume? So if the defense is why the Cowboys lose this season, Chris Richard's not getting any jobs. He's not getting our head coach job, and he's certainly maybe not even getting a defensive coordinator job somewhere else. He's his own worst enemy if that's the case. I don't really buy that theory, but
no, I don't really buy it either, but it's one of those things that you start seeing it up there, and I feel like sometimes we need to talk about it and put some logic to it so it'll maybe calm some people down, because it's not fun seeing that stuff all the time because it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't have basis in the reality that this team faces. Just like practice yesterday and somebody on the roof at the Star Complex, and the jokes automatically go to Bill Belichick, but there's a couple who say, well, maybe it is. It's conspiracy theory time when the Cowboys are in a situation like this.
Yeah, when I look at this Cowboys defense, I find my theory is much more normal. It's that it's a composite of a lot of different things, potentially. One is that we're still not good at safety. And all of those expectations that Xavier Woods was going to be something may have been a little, exaggerated. He was a 6th round pick for a reason. He hasn't turned into Earl Thomas. Sorry. But there's that Chidobe Awuzie isn't really blossoming in the third year the way we would have hoped. There's the fact that Jordan Lewis is still sitting on the bench way more than he should, as far as I can tell. And that might be the biggest sin of all of Chris Richard's. Leighton Vander Esch may be having a little bit of a sophomore slump, also dealing with health issues. I mean, there's just a lot of different things you can look at as to why the defense isn't so strong anymore.
And speaking of Lewis being on the bench, what do you think of the Cowboys bringing in this cornerback off the Colts practice squad instead of promoting Alumba?
I'm not thrilled about it because I have been a Donovan Alumba fan for 2 years, but that is one of those situations where in McClay I trust, and if this is a player that Will McClay has seen on another team's practice squad and said we need to go get that guy, prove me wrong. I mean, I don't have any issue with that. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and of course,
if anything, it makes me excited about this guy, knowing they could have promoted Alumba and didn't. I look at it that way.
Wow, that's a real glass half full kind of thing.
Yeah, 3/4 full on that.
Yeah, right. But I don't know. I can't really say whether or not I'm worried or unfazed by Anthony Brown being out for the year. I don't know.
Anthony Brown is one of those guys who has done well enough, and considering where he came from, he was a 6th round pick. You're like, you feel good about him. You have good feelings about him. But to me, Anthony Brown is not that different from a lot of guys on our roster. I mean, he's I'm trying to think of a comparison. Like, he's a Cedric Wilson. He's a,
Noah Brown.
I'm blanking. Yeah, I mean, he's a Joe Thomas. He's one of these guys that they come in and every now and then when we see him, they make some solid plays and we're like, hey, we're glad he's on our team. But there's a lot of those guys out there. We're not talking about replacing Byron Jones. I mean, we can overcome that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. My only deviation from that point of view on it is he's not giving up a lot of big plays. You know, you're not hearing his name called in negative situations repeatedly.
Part of that is our scheme. I mean, we don't give up big plays as a whole from a schematic standpoint. That's the way the Marinelli's defense is designed. So, I mean, there's that part to it. I will say that at this point in the season, we're going into week 12, and the worst injury on our roster is Anthony Brown and Tyrone Crawford. We've been doing pretty good.
Yeah,
compared to most teams.
Yep. All righty. Well, that will wrap it up for the first segment here. Let's go ahead and hop into a quick break, and we will be right back after this. All right. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we've got the Lions behind us, and it wasn't always pretty going through there. It was actually a little bit nerve-wracking towards the end of that game. And you have to wonder how the Cowboys are going to manage to get through this next week, the Week 12 matchup with the New England Patriots in New England.
Who said they're going to get through it?
Well, they're going to get through it one way or another, but I mean, are they going to do it with the W or with the L?
I mean, you know, let's be real. This game is in Foxborough. The Patriots, I don't have the exact record, but I mean, they have lost so few games in Foxborough for a long time now. The odds are incredibly against us. I will say that I think that, I mean, it's funny. You look at the Patriots, and in many ways, you think, you know, this is one of probably the best opportunities you could have to beat them. Tom Brady isn't looking quite so godly anymore. They don't have a lot of offensive weapons, but they boast the best defense in the NFL, and it's still the Patriots. They're still 9-1 this year. So, I mean, how can you go into this game feeling very confident?
Well, yeah, and you say that the offense, or imply that the offense isn't perhaps on top of its game, but if you look at the scoring stats for this year, the Dallas Cowboys on offensive scoring are ranked 4th in the NFL. The Patriots are ranked 3rd. Oh
yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying is that even at their worst, the Patriots are still an elite team, and that's what's so crazy. I mean, when we talk about the greatest teams in NFL history, coaches, players, I mean, Belichick and Brady deserve to be in that conversation every single time. The standard that they have is amazing. The only thing I'll say about the points per game ranking is that part of that has to do with their defense. They're getting set up like they are only middle of the road in terms of offensive yardage. So that tells you their defense is setting them up in good scoring positions often. And so that's really where it's going to come down to the Cowboys. Can they do anything on offense to keep the field position game even and take away some of that advantage?
Yeah, and while the Cowboys do have the number 1 ranked offense in the NFL right now, going against the number 1 ranked defense, that's a big deal. It's not like an even match. You can stop something better and you can make something happen in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So it is a worrisome thing. And, you know, the Patriots offense, they're not looking bad. So I worry more about the matchup between the Patriots offense and the Cowboys defense.
Yeah, agreed. One of the things that really scares me about this game is the Cowboys have not been good against pass-catching running backs. And the Patriots just chew that up with James White and some of their other players. That, to me, that may be the biggest weakness of all for this is how are the Cowboys going to deal with play action and passing out of the backfield, because they have struggled with that big time.
Yeah, and good thing is against Detroit, we actually saw Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch starting to get a little bit more involved again.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be crucial in handling not only a pass-catching running back, but just a running game in general.
Yeah, and one good thing is this definitely will not be, you won't have to worry about Tom Brady running around the field like Jeff Driscoll did. So that is one issue that we don't have to worry about.
Man, that was kind of crazy. He was able to do that as much as he was. I mean, thinking about who Driscoll actually is, I mean, he was looking like a superstar out there against this defense.
Yeah, it's like old Steve Young, cruising around out there. But it's and really, you can talk about talent, you can talk about schemes. This game may very well just simply come down to Bill Belichick versus Jason Garrett, and that might be the worst matchup of all. Unfortunately.
Yeah, the coaching side of this is definitely not equal. It's not even as equal as the standings of both teams would indicate, and that's not all that equal either. But, it was something that you had brought up before in an article, and that set the Cowboys, they have a propensity to enter a game and stun people, a game that they had no business really even competing in. And they go in and crush it. And that is it's a trend that is noticeable throughout Jason Garrett's tenure, and even going back before that a little bit to Phillips and Parcells. And it's something that I like seeing in the culture of this team. But, I mean, how realistic is that?
I mean, the Cowboys are so perpetually overrated that it's very rare they're ever considered an underdog. Mm-hmm. So these few times that they go into a game as the underdog, they do seem to rise to the occasion. And even if they don't come away with the win, they can make a real game of it. I don't think many people would be shocked if this game is competitive. But I think if the Cowboys actually won this game, that would be a huge upset.
When was the last time you played the Patriots? Was it the 2015 with Greg Hardy getting those several sacks in the first quarter?
I mean, yeah, it was probably 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Based on the rotation. Yeah.
And that was one of those things, too. Oh, my God, how are we going to beat the Patriots? And, yeah, it was earlier in the season, and it was a whole different team. But, then you get Greg Hardy coming in, and that was his first game back from a suspension. Mm-hmm. I believe his first game as a Cowboy, too. And he comes in and gets 2 or 3 sacks on Brady in the first quarter and just really disrupts that whole offense, which I believe we ended up winning that game.
That sounds right to me. And right now, if you could say that on defense there's one thing that is working for this team, it is the pass rush. It is DeMarcus Lawrence, Robert Quinn, Michael Bennett. Maybe he'll be interesting going up against his former team. That is the one area where I would say that if the Cowboys are going to win this thing, it's right there. Can they get to Brady?
And I don't see that actually being a factor because, again, it's not – it doesn't do anything for their defense stopping our offense. And we've seen the last couple of weeks, you can throw the running game into shambles, total, utter shambles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the passing game was making up for it, in spades. But will that happen against the New England defense?
Is Dak Prescott a real MVP candidate or not? That's the question you're asking me.
It's not just Dak Prescott. We've had too many drops from the receivers to roll that out completely.
Well, of course, and that is part of it too. But I mean that is kind of what this game comes down to: is if Belichick decides I'm going to follow this pattern of shutting Zeke down and forcing Prescott to beat me, will the Cowboys' passing game respond? I agree. I mean, the drops and I don't know. I still feel like that they are not letting go of Jason Witten enough. That it's time to start utilizing Blake Jarwin more, especially in a game like this where he can make a big thing happen once the ball's in his hands that Jason just simply can't do anymore. It's one of those games where a few big things are going to need to happen. A broken play, something is going to have to help the Cowboys along the way. They need a defensive turnover. They need maybe one big return from Tavon Austin or Tony Pollard on a kick or a punt. I mean, it's going to be one of those kind of games.
But, I mean, what are they – my thing on it is that Blake Jarwin is not as good of a blocker as Jason Witten. And we need that, especially if you're having any issues along the offensive line, which the Cowboys have had some issues in pass protection this year. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Run out there with 2 tight ends every time? And if so, I mean, who is the sacrifice on that? You know, I mean, are you going to pull, which receiver are you going to pull out so you can have 2 tight ends on every play, so you get the blocker for pass protection, and then you get the big play threat from Blake Jarwin, you know, and at the same time, I don't want to discount Jason Witten's not spectacular, not exciting, but reliable 5 to 10 yards on a catch.
That's true. I mean, but you do have to keep in mind that we pretty much have stopped using the fullback completely now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you still, even if you run out 2 tight ends, you've got 3 receivers out there. You can play.
I tell you. No, go ahead, finish up, because I'm going to change subject.
Okay, well, you can play both your tight ends and still have Cooper, Gallup, and Cobb out there.
Yeah, you can. And one thing that I liked, and that was just a new little wrinkle I hadn't noticed from Kellen Moore this year, maybe you have, maybe I just missed it, but I liked seeing Zeke and Pollard out there at once when Pollard was splitting out into wide receiver, because that's 2 explosive players with the ball in their hands, and it's just a matter of getting it to them, which is a lot easier than the other stuff. So
absolutely,
I like seeing that.
And you know, it's funny, I don't feel like we have seen Pollard like coming out of the backfield and line up in the slot or being used sort of in those ways. I remember when he was drafted, there was all that talk like, oh, he's the next Kamara or Sproles or one of those types of players. I don't remember him lining up as a receiver at all. But, I mean, you know, teams strategize for the week, but they also think about opponents to come. And maybe this game circled on their calendar all year as the toughest game they're going to play. Maybe they've been saving a couple things for it.
I don't know, but yeah, I couldn't tell if you were saying you actually didn't see that, but against Detroit, they did do that. They had Zeke and Pollard out there, Zeke in the backfield, Pollard went up to the far side.
No, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, but it's just we haven't seen it much compared to the way that Pollard was advertised and the type of player we thought we were getting. He's really been used more like a traditional running back than I would have expected.
Yeah, you know, I would say that we're probably going to see a similar type of motion from Dak Prescott that we've seen the last couple of weeks, as opposed to what we saw in the beginning of the season where he really wasn't moving around that much. And I think that that's going to work towards us. But if I can put one exclamation point somewhere in this entire team right now, for God's sakes, Tavon Austin, stop running backwards and sideways. That one kick, the punt return, what did he do? He went back 15 yards, and then there was a penalty on top of it. I mean, come on. That's what I didn't like about Dez Bryant, is that he thought dancing around was good and not paying attention to the fact you're moving backwards.
Well, did you notice that Cobb was in on the next punt after that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, Austin had a couple of those punts, and then Randall Cobb was fair catching. Or he had at least, I don't know how many more. There was at least one, and Cobb was out there and fair caught it. So maybe there was a little talking to with Tavon after that.
I don't know. I'd say throw Pollard back there on punts too, but then on that opening kickoff, I mean, he should have just stayed in the end zone. His instinct was telling him to stay in the end zone, and then he questioned it and came out and ended up getting out to like the 15. I mean, he even had another player there saying, stop, don't go. And he did. He towed that line, and he was behind the line. But he still went out.
I miss Rich Bisaccia. I'm sorry. It was, who's the guy now? O'Quinn? Keith O'Quinn?
Man, and I was about to make that exact joke to you, man. I was about to say, is it, because I think it's Keith O'Quinn. Yeah. I don't even know the guy's name because he is so unremarkable so far.
It has been a very poor showing from special teams this year, and considering the talent, I mean, Tony Pollard was a standout kick returner in college. Tavon Austin is one of the more naturally gifted punt returners in the game. It is not good. Even Brett Maher regressed a little from last year. I mean, it's just all across the board been bad. We need to figure something out there.
Yeah, we do. But we'll have to wait until Sunday at 3:25 to figure that one out. And Man, hopefully it's not a, excuse the language, but hopefully it's not a real shit show, because we don't need another one of those this year. And, end up being like the Jets game or something.
Yeah, and truth be told, this game can go horribly, and it's not the end of the world, because Dallas does still have the 2-game cushion on Philadelphia, one in the overall record, one from the tiebreaker. We're going into our 2 Thursday games here with Thanksgiving and the game the following week. Those kind of line up well for us. So the opportunity to win the division, make the playoffs, that does not hinge on this game. It would just be really, really nice to look good against the best in the business.
Yeah, and, we may have a bit of a third game in there, too, because the Rams aren't looking so great. So Bills, Bears, and Rams, they might actually be 3 wins that we can get done. But it's going to depend a lot on how this Patriots game shapes up. So
absolutely.
Again, we're going to have to wait and see which version of the Cowboys comes out on Sunday. And until then, we're just going to have to keep speculating. But I appreciate you taking the time with me today, Jess. And for everybody else, you can follow Jess Haney on Twitter at Cowboys Addicts. You can follow us at Cowboys Nation on Twitter. And be sure to check in with InsideTheStar.com every day for the latest news on the Cowboys. As far as that goes, be aware of the whole clickbait thing. Don't follow every story that you see on social media. Keep it a little bit calm until game time, and then make all the noise that you can. That was a very nice presence the Cowboys fans had in Detroit last week. I would love to see even a fraction of that in the Patriots house this week. But thanks again for listening, and be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us wherever you can. Aside from that, have a safe weekend. Go Cowboys.